the ability to regulate how you navigate challenging situations, how you navigate stress is the key component of high performance, because high performance involves stress, pressure, challenges, getting outside of your comfort zone.
Welcome to this episode of Coach Noah Talks, where I have the pleasure of speaking with Sebastian Brückner, an internationally recognized expert in applied sports psychology who has worked with national team and Olympic athletes. I'm excited to have him on the show to share his insights and knowledge on emotional self-regulation. Good morning, Dr. Brückner.
Good morning, Noah.
I'm excited to dive into today's topic, which is emotional self-regulation. So to get started, could you talk a bit about your academic and professional background?
Yeah, absolutely. I am located in Germany right now. I was born and raised in Germany. Huge part of my, especially sports psychology education and training, I did receive in the US. But growing up, and do have 13 years experience of an elite swimmer, up to German nationals, Olympic trials. So definitely that high performance identity and mindset that I think still informs my career in sports psychology partly, and also some of the interventions and projects that I'm involved in today. Then after graduating from high school in the southwestern part of Germany, did study sports science, more like a generalist kinesiology-based education there. From my training and thesis, did mostly focus on motor learning, motor behavior theories and research. As part of that, I did actually spend 9 months at Texas A&M in their motor behavior lab, which was a really interesting experience just as far as research aspect. And yeah, just a really amazing group of research professionals. I had the opportunity back then already to stay in the States and start working towards a PhD, but there I think my sport identity was too dominant because motor behavior research was just very basic research. And for me, that career would probably have taken me too far away from sports. And so I actually first ended up going back to Germany. Initially started working as a sports writer and sports journalism for a couple of years, which I think, reflecting back, also does have quite an influence on my professional career right now, because the idea of talking to athletes from a journalist perspective, and you're trying to understand their story so you can write about them, their experiences, whatever happened at whatever kind of competitions or events. I think that is definitely something that was also part of my dissertation research, where I did a qualitative study. But then again, talking to clients today, coaches, athletes, other performers, you're trying to make a connection, understand their story, and then support them with whatever kind of issues or performance enhancement development. I think that sports writing, journalism fits nicely into the not really linear career development and part of the training and experience. I did then, being back in Germany, also based in my sports studies experience, I have the opportunity to start working in an experiential outdoor education program that was just being built locally. And then again, just another piece of a puzzle, that experience working with a group of adolescents, kids, sometimes also adults, in these outdoor settings, helping them facilitate some of the interpersonal experiences in those outdoor sports settings, but also on an individual level. The whole idea of experiential outdoor education being that people experience situations outside of their comfort zones, then seeing what is actually happening with people once they're in that situation, and how do you help them navigate, and have a group help them navigate some of those experiences. So definitely from an applied perspective, that was another aspect there. I started thinking about the idea of, yes, I had some mentors approach me about the idea of doing a PhD, continuing academic education, and then combining it with those sports writing, outdoor education experiences, and then also my own athletic career in swimming. Then the idea came up how about trying to pursue a career in applied sports psychology. Back then, there was no formal training opportunities in Germany. So having built some professional network back in the States, I then reached out, looked for opportunities to get some graduate training, and did end up getting into the sports psychology program, PhD program at the University of Tennessee. So 2003, I joined their graduate program and completed my PhD studies dissertation with Dr. Craig Risbrook as my supervisor. Through that, also I got introduced to AASP as the Applied Sports Psychology organization, and definitely till today, my professional home base network, go-to organization, presenting some of my projects, but also being inspired of what other professionals are doing. And then after finishing my PhD, and like I said, my dissertation, then again, trying to understand experiences, I did write my dissertation about German Olympians' experiences competing at the 2004 Athens Games. So I did 13 existential phenomenological interviews with German athletes, what helped them perform up to their expectations at the Olympics, and what they felt in hindsight maybe kept them from performing up to their potential, which had not been no study like that in Germany before, really talking to athletes and trying to understand their experience. Competing at the Olympics, finishing my PhD and going back to Germany, I did actually end up being able to get a job at one of the German Olympic training centers, where I spent about 10 years working with aspiring Olympians, coaches. From two perspectives, organizationally, there are not a whole lot of staff positions in applied sports psychology in Germany, and even within the high-performing training center setup. So my staff position was actually more focused on dual career development and personality development from a holistic perspective, helping them align part of their education, university studies with their high-performance sports. Because in the German sports system, unlike in North America, the US, there's not that university sports system with the student athlete. But then over the years, I also started building a bigger part of my career directly in mental performance, sports psychology services for athletes, for coaches. And especially 2012 to 2016, I worked with the German Badminton National Team, with their Olympic athletes, with the coaches, also specifically doing pre-Olympic workshops, how they could optimally prepare for the Olympics. After the Rio Olympics in 2016, I did end up leaving the Olympic Training Center and relocated within Germany a little bit more to an academic setting in the northwestern part of Germany, where I'm still located now. And part of my career development then also involved working for the German sports psychology organization in the leadership role of kind of the applied services, overseeing applied sports psychology training, continuing education, some of those specific services. But now I've transitioned into a mostly project-focused, self-employed setup there. Most of my work is freelance, some business leadership coaching for a US-based company, some projects through the university within the German high-performance system with some of the national governing bodies.
So I want to now move into talking about self-regulation. And so firstly, what is self-regulation, and what more specifically is emotional self-regulation?
And that's a really good question. I think the ability to regulate how you navigate challenging situations, how you navigate stress, is the key component of high performance, because high performance involves stress, pressure, challenges, getting outside of your comfort zone. The idea of being able to navigate whatever happens then on a behavioral level, so that you're actually getting the results and the outcomes that you're striving for and preparing for. On a cognitive level, as far as what is your focus, what is your thinking. And I mean, as we know, we can't really control our thinking, meaning we can't make us not think about certain things, but then regulating whatever is happening on a thought level. And ultimately, whatever happens on a behavioral and thinking level with regards of navigating situations, regulating yourself, does boil down to emotional self-regulation, because whatever happens to us under stress is a lot of times triggered by certain emotional reactions. So making sure that we regulate and navigate our emotional responses is a key to then being able to adapt, change your thinking, your focus again, and then that may be key to making sure that you're able to, on a behavioral level, implement those behaviors that are most likely to get you the results that you're looking for.
And so it sounds like you're saying that the high performance context, it's not feasible to avoid stress and pressure. So it's a matter of navigating that and using self-regulation. If you're in a high performance domain or want to be, you can't expect to avoid experiencing pressure, stress, all these things that are associated with those environments. It's just a matter of learning how to self-regulate and manage those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. And that's also what some of your previous guests talk about. I watched part of the conversation with Peter Harwell and his experience working with Olympic athletes. Yes, they're in a context, the result matters to them. It means the world to them to be able to succeed. So yes, there are going to be emotional reactions. There will be pressure, and you're not able to avoid that. The idea of flow, think about that aspect. Yes, and if you're experiencing flow, your mind becomes crystal clear, you're on autopilot, your perception of time changes, and there you're probably not experiencing pressure, stress, experiencing the situation as challenging, difficult, and hard. But how often do you actually manage to get yourself in a flow state? Think about your own experiences performing in different settings, be that athletic settings or be that professional settings with leading workshops, working on a golf course. How often do you really manage to get yourself in a perfect flow state? If it happens, great. And there might be certain ways to try and promote that, getting there. But more often than not, we will experience stress. So then our ability to recognize that, to accept it, and also have tools at our disposal to navigate whatever is happening. And again, on an emotional level, on a cognitive thinking level, and ultimately then also on a behavioral level. And one of the reasons why the idea of emotional self-regulation resonates so strongly with me is if you haven't managed to navigate and align and regulate your emotions, you won't be able to think clearly, to listen clearly, to focus clearly. So in that sense, really the emotional self-regulation as the key to being able to perform under stress and pressure and in challenging situations.
So when we talk about emotional self-regulation, is it about not experiencing certain emotions and saying you shouldn't have this type of emotion in this situation, you should have this type of emotion? Or is emotional self-regulation about recognizing and then pivoting in an appropriate direction?
That's a great question. And like I just said, we can't really control what is happening with us in specific situations. Again, we can recognize what might be more helpful reactions and try and pivot into that direction, to use the phrase that you just introduced. So in that sense, for me, it does really align very much with a mindfulness and ACT perspective, That's become more prominent in performance domains and in sports psychology and athletic domains. The crucial first step being becoming aware of what's actually happening, because a lot of times people just fall prey to whatever kind of triggers an automatic reaction they might have formed through sometimes even subconscious experiences, and we fall automatically in the infamous fight or flight or freeze reflexes. So becoming aware of what's actually happening, and then certainly that acceptance part of it, and work your emotional, mental muscle to try and let go. Don't become fused with your emotional reaction, and then being able to try and pivot into the more optimal, preferable reaction response, feeling, thinking, and ultimately behavior.
Can you clarify when you said there, not become fused with your emotional response? For the listener that might not be familiar with that term, fused and diffused, could you explain that?
As part of the ACT approach and ACT hexaflex, one of the aspects of that is the idea of fusion and diffusion. And the meaning behind that is the experience of an individual in a stressful and a challenging situation, and they might start feeling overwhelmed or anxious or frightened. That part of their experience becomes everything that we're focusing on in the moment. On a descriptive level, what might be some of the thoughts associated with that? You could use the example of becoming fused, the expression of I'm feeling totally overwhelmed right now. And that pretty much describes that freezing reaction and being unable to control any aspects and just falling prey to the situation. And from a more diffused perspective, shifting to a statement like, part of my experience in this situation is now that I'm experiencing the feeling of not being able to handle the pressure. So instead of immersing yourself as a whole and merging yourself with the idea of being overwhelmed, being able to shift perspective and saying part of your experience is the aspect of feeling overwhelmed and not your whole experience. The idea of I am versus part of my experience is...
So I am is this fused state, whereas part of my experience is a diffused state. So let's go through an example using this ABC model, which is what you used in your intervention with these volleyball referees. What is this ABC model? Where does it come from?
The ABC model is definitely rooted in cognitive behavioral theory. More specifically, Albert Ellis was the one who actually proposed it. But as we're going to see, walking through the example, it does actually lend itself really well to also implement many aspects from more of a mindfulness and an ACT perspective in the project training volleyball referees and stress management. One of the prime examples that referees would discuss was usually what happens in a match if I make a bad call, a wrong decision, that you can usually gauge maybe even by your second thought, but you've already decided and made your call, blown the whistle. So the referee making the wrong call on second thought, realizing that or seeing the reaction of the fans. So that's the adverse event that creates the stressful, challenging situation. So that stands for the A. The B in the model stands for whatever beliefs are associated with that situation. And the C stands for whatever consequences that causes on an emotional and behavioral level. And the beliefs, of course, are the thoughts. So again, you see the different layers that I talked about before related to self-regulation, navigate challenging situations. So we have the thinking, the emotional, but also the behavioral levels. I do always like to talk with clients after we've discussed and they have described the challenging situation. I like to jump first into the emotional and behavioral consequences, because that mirrors how a lot of people actually experience that situation in real life, because their perception is, here's something happening, and that fact, that situation does this and this to me, so is directly causing those consequences. I like to follow that path when doing the coaching exercise with them, and only then in a second step backtrack and help them think about, now that you see all those different emotional, behavioral consequences, which are of course reflecting a lot of the typical stress reactions that we experience on a physiological level: raised heartbeat, sweating, maybe some effect on breathing, feeling tense and pressured. So all those kind of things. Then also some of the emotional reactions might be feeling angry, feeling threatened, maybe feeling shame. So then backstepping and help them think about, what are actually some of those statements that are going through your mind, through your head in that situation. And then might be something like, in that referee situation, oh damn, here you go again, just made another really bad call. Could be something like, people are thinking, I can't get things right. Something like, why did this happen again? Initially might also be some of those subconscious triggers, and might be related to some of those universal needs of the need to be liked, the need to be right, the need to make right decisions, not being criticized, and so on. So exploring some of those relationships and really what happens based on those automatic triggered responses, thinking, fueling into emotions and behavior. And a lot of times, and that was especially with the referees, it really opened their eyes, and a lot of them hadn't recognized before that they actually have a choice what kind of thoughts and beliefs they try to work towards or get access to or think about in that specific situation. So then the second step then is to try and help them think about what alternative thoughts or beliefs might help them navigate that stressful situations better. Some of the primaries you would use would be, what kind of statement could help you change perspective in that situation? For one, so the idea of reappraisal in the situation, or another aspect, normalizing whatever is happening, because you can try as hard as you want to, but the probability of you getting every call in a game right as a referee in that example is probably fairly slim. So accepting that all you can do is try as hard as you want to, but probably mistakes still happen, and it's not the end of the world. The players and coaches also make mistakes. So that normalizing aspect, a huge second aspect of kind of helping them work towards alternative beliefs, thoughts that might be more helpful in that situation. And then the last step is looking at those new beliefs, those new thoughts, and imagining yourself being able to regulate your emotional, cognitive experience in that situation. How would it actually change your experience? And a lot of times then I do have performers looking at the worksheet and they're like, well, yeah, I just feel a lot more loose. I feel more clear. I'm better able to keep my focus. And they can actually already experience that in that situation, not being at the game or on the court, even us just walking through the example, be that in person, or that's also a great exercise that you can actually do remotely, just sharing your screen, working on through video calls. An important aspect going through that exercise is always pointing out, now we've looked at this situation and gone through the process, of course, you can't expect the next time you're in the situation, your new default answer is going to be the alternative that we just created, right? You still have these strong, ingrained, sometimes subconscious, automatic triggers. So very likely the initial response will be very much the same. But an important first step, having gone through the worksheet, the ABC process, it could be recognizing your emotional, your physiological reactions sooner, creating that awareness so that it becomes easier to pivot, to use the word again, and direct your attention, your thinking, your behavior in the alternative that you've created. Again, working towards that change and creating a new automatic with the more productive responses in that situation will require training and repetition, and not come from once going through that worksheet, creating a new idea, new opportunities to regulate yourself and navigate that situation.
And I think that's an important point, that it's like anything else. You wouldn't go to the gym and expect you did your one workout, you spent an hour with your trainer, and now you're done. Your muscles are healthy, your endurance has improved. You would logically assume you're going to go back again, probably the next day, in a couple days, and again, and then maybe in 6 months, you'd be like, wow, I've reached my whatever goals I've had in terms of my muscle mass or my cardiovascular endurance. So I think that's a very important point. And can we now go through a golf example? I miss a 3-foot putt in a tournament. Would that be the A in that ABC model? And then the B would be, wow, I suck. I wasted all my time preparing and now I don't have a chance to win anymore. Or I wonder what my dad thinks right now watching me and I hit that bad shot. That would be the B.
Yeah. And then if you're looking like at a major competition, could also be, oh, and I've lost the shot for my bonus from the sponsor, something like that. Absolutely. So those kind of automatic thoughts that from comparisons, from reliving mistakes that you've made before, in talking yourself down, self-doubt, all those kind of examples. Yes, absolutely.
And then the C would be my heart rate increasing, muscle tension.
That's definitely C. That's the consequences, because your heart rate going up, and that's not a belief, that's not a thought. The B are just whatever statements, self-talk is going through your mind. So basically the B are everything that happens on a cognitive level as far as thinking or beliefs. And again, sometimes those things might initially be happening in your subconscious, but it's still all the thinking, the beliefs. Things like stress responses, sweating, increased breathing rate, increased heart rate, those are in that case physiological consequences.
So I think it's really interesting for listeners to understand. So the ABC, right? I had something happen, there was an event, I hit a bad shot, then I start having beliefs, thoughts, things that arise. And like you mentioned, a lot of them are not in my control. And then from that, I get muscle tension, my heart rate gets raised, I start sweating more.
A lot of times people might actually struggle a little bit to reflect